We are very excited to see such a good turnout tonight. I am Lori Miller. I live in Pepin County, and I'm a member of the League of Women Voters. The League, as you might know, is a nonpartisan organization, and what does that mean? It means we don't endorse candidates or parties, but we do look at and are concerned about questions in the political sphere. So that would mean empowering voters, civic engagement, and helping people with the voting process. This is, when we were putting together this program, we thought there is such a huge topic, lots of interest, where do we even start? And there was three things that we really wanted to do, and that was one, be educational, to give you some facts. Number two, as wonderful as facts are, give you some stories. And then also provide what seems to be the biggest tripping point, at least for me personally, and that is the legalities of immigration. I can't tell you how many conversations I've had where I get into it and we get stuck with, but can you do that? Is allowed? When did that happen? Is that really changing? And then the conversation stops right there. So tonight with this format, what we would like to do is be able to give you that information so that you can have good conversations about immigration with your neighbors, with your friends, with your family, with your elected officials. And we wanted you to get that information directly from people who work with our immigrant communities. And that is why we have the panel that we do up here today. And we also wanted to provide a format where you can sit and listen and absorb it, think about it, and then be able to form your own questions to ask the panel and get them answered in real time. So the one other little bit of philosophizing that I will come up with before I just give you the nuts and bolts is I think everyone here has at least two things in common. And that would be you're interested in immigration. And probably somewhere in your family tree, you have an immigrant to this country. Also, you love your community. And if those two things are not true, you would not be here, you'd be at home. So I urge you to think about that link that you have to each other as you listen and talk and ask questions. Okay. So some of the logistics, we have snacks, we have handouts. And if we run out of handouts and you would like some more, there is a sign-up sheet. We can email them to you. And then bathrooms, when you go back out into the lobby and you're heading toward the front door, just turn to your right. And there's men's and women's bathrooms there. We will be doing questions once all the speakers get done speaking. We've given you index cards to write those questions on, and volunteers will collect them. We just find that that's a better flow so that the speakers can say what they need to uninterrupted. And we'll answer as many of your questions as we have time to do that tonight. I'd like to thank the co-sponsors for this event, the American Association of University Women, the ACLU, Literacy Chippewa Valley, the Wisconsin Farmers Union, and Jonah. And I also want to very much thank Emmanuel Lutheran Church for providing this space for this event. This is very nice. No steps, nice big parking lot. They're wonderful community partners. There's just a few people from the League I want to point out. One is our League, local League chapter president, and that would be Ellen Oaks. And if she would stand up, you'll hear from her a little bit later. And then the planning committee, Marilyn Hagan, if she would stand up, or just wave your hand, whatever you want to do, Marilyn. Connie Russell and Joan Jepsenberger. Okay, so thank you to them. We are recording this event, and we will put it on our website. And if you want to watch it later on or share it with somebody else, the link to our website is at the bottom of the agenda, and there's also a QR code, if that's a better way for you to get to the website. So let's get into it. We're going to start with Amanda Jennerman, and she is going to talk about the legalities of immigration, the thing that I just stumble over all the time. And she has more than 20 years experience as an immigration lawyer for the firm Peinsbach in Madison. And I'll let her, as well as all the other speakers when it's their turn, give as much personal information about herself as she would like. So thank you, Amanda.
Okay, good evening. I guess it's early today to spend time in Eau Claire. It's becoming a second home to me, and I really take every opportunity I can to be here. So invite me back, and I will happily come. So my name is Amanda Jennerman, and yes, I am an immigration attorney. I have been practicing immigration law exclusively since I graduated in 2003. It's a lot for me to say, and it is one of those things that if I didn't love what I was doing, I wouldn't do it because law school was awful. And so I really found my home in law school when it came to immigration. It was an area that I had no experience with prior to coming to law school. I went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison. As an undergrad, I studied women's studies and African American history and saw the crossover of law and social justice. And I said, this is something I need to figure out and how I'm going to practice. And so in law school at the University of Denver, I had an opportunity to represent a young woman from Sierra Leone who had witnessed her family murdered in the streets of her home community, fled to another West African country, and boarded a plane and came to the United States seeking refuge. And so, long story short, she actually got placed into deportation proceedings. And as the law school didn't have an immigration clinic at the time, they said, we see what your interests are, we know what kind of your background is in social justice, in violence against women, sexual abuse history. We'd like you to represent this young woman. And so I did, knowing nothing about immigration law. And that was it. That sealed the deal for me. I was like, this is what I want to do for the long haul. And so to say that I've been doing it since 2003 really holds dear to me. I've seen many administrations go through the area of immigration law, and when I thought things couldn't be worse, here we are. And I say that because not all the administrations have been great on immigration. I haven't found the perfect administration yet, whether it's a Democrat or a Republican in power. It's the rhetoric right now that just feels so daunting and so painful and very aggressive, that feels very different from what I've experienced in the last 20 years. And so I do want to go through this handout and talk about immigration law. I go to conferences, and these are week-long conferences, so anything I talk about here today could be a 4-day conference on its own. And so my goal is to really provide some overview, be here to answer questions, and make it relative to what's going on here in Wisconsin. And somebody was up here speaking to some of the panelists before, saying, I listen to the news and every day it's something else. Yeah, it is. And so I looked at my notes, and this was prepared for a February presentation I gave, and I was like, okay, that doesn't matter anymore, that doesn't apply. And so the reality is things are changing on the ground so quickly that as a practitioner, that's one of the greatest challenges I face. So it's hard enough for me to digest what I think I've understood for 20 years, and then to relay that to the communities that I'm working with through language, through interpreters, people crying, people afraid, right? This is the reality of the communities that we are working with, whether it is from Central America, West African, South African, Middle Eastern, China, the Philippines. Every community is feeling this in a very different way, and my job is to try to digest that and explain it along the way. And sometimes it's not the easiest thing to do. So immigration is run through a process called the Immigration and Nationality Act. That's the major act that controls immigration law. We call that the INA. And there are rules and there are provisions. Some allow individuals to come to the United States, and determine what you have to establish to enter the United States. We call that admissibility. And then there are other aspects of immigration law that address deportability or removable acts. So how do we say, no, we don't think you can stay, and now we have grounds to remove you. So those are kind of like the large provisions, and I think people get confused because they don't understand that there are distinct actions and distinct acts that allow somebody to enter the United States, to be present, and then certain acts that, if conducted, can get you removed from the United States. So those are just kind of like large concepts to think about. And I think people get wrapped up in the concept of, well, why can't people just do it the right way? If you had to understand the system that is broken, you would very clearly understand why people attempt to do it the right way. And when they are told they will wait 20 years to be reunited with their family, they make other choices, okay? So the idea of this is a system that if we just get in line and follow the rules, it would be very orderly. It's a broken system. It has been for 20 years. And so how we maneuver through that system and how we create executive actions and policies to interpret the way the INA is enforced is one of the issues we have to look at. So the Immigration and Nationality Act, that's the overarching law that impacts that I have to interpret. Then we have these regulation, policy manuals, and memorandum. So regulations are things that Congress can write and say, this is how we are going to implement different areas of the INA, or this is our interpretation of how this works through the INA. And then we have policy manuals. So I think about affirmative applications. So this would be a situation in which somebody is present in the United States, and let's say they came as a student. So they traveled from their home country, got a visa at their home consulate outside of the United States, entered the United States, a Custom and Border officer reviewed their passport and said, okay, welcome. You can stay for your 4 years to study at the University of Eau Claire. Okay, great. Well, while studying at the University of Eau Claire, they found madly in love with the person of their dreams. And now they want to stay in the United States because they're married to now a U.S. citizen. So that U.S. citizen can start a petition for that individual who is present prior on an F1 student visa. That application requires an interview to show that the marriage was entered into good faith, and that while you were a student, you didn't break any rules, you didn't break any laws, you acted in a way that we think is respectable to obtain your residency. So policy manuals from the USCIS, which is the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services Office, they adjudicate affirmative applications. So if you're applying for a green card or your residency based on marriage, you often have to appear at a USCIS office. In the state of Wisconsin, our main office is down in Milwaukee. Although the state of Wisconsin is split kind of at a diagonal, so individuals who are living more in the Chippewa Valley may go to Minnesota, to their local USCIS office in the Twin Cities to have an interview before an immigration officer. And so, again, policy memos and memorandum are internal documents that use the Immigration and Nationality Act to interpret and apply the law to these different types of applications. And then there's memorandum. So then you have the Department of Justice, you have the Department of Homeland Security, you have all these other agencies that write memorandums, again, interpreting how they want the law to be impacted and how they want it to be adjudicated. Then we have this thing called executive orders. This is the hot topic, right? So when I did this presentation in February, there were 122 executive orders, so from January 20th until February 14th, 122 executive orders directed at immigration policy or some aspect of immigration policy. When I was sitting at the fabulous coffee shop today in Eau Claire called Shift, which I love, 284 executive actions have been thrown down that impact immigration and customs enforcement and the rule of the Department of Homeland Security. Again, these are from as simple as saying we are no longer going to call individuals applicants or immigrants or non-citizens. We are going to revert to calling them aliens. This is an executive action. So, right, harmful, hurtful, but that's one tier. Other executive actions we are seeing include the actions of basically criminalizing or deputizing the IRS to look at individuals who are filing taxes and paying taxes with their ITIN numbers to determine whether or not we should be deporting those individuals. So again, executive orders are coming down hard, heavy, and fast. And I think that's the game, right? Because it's hard for us to stay on top of the changes if they're coming at us at such a rapid fire experience. And creating fear. Because what we hear is what we hear in the news, and not always about the litigation that is going on to stop some of these actions. I am not a litigator. I am an affirmative, I do a lot of affirmative applications. I don't do a lot of federal litigation. I suddenly had to pick up the Constitution again and go, what are the rights, again, of individuals who are coming in at the border? Is their device safe? Is it not? As an immigration lawyer, am I going to be leaving with a burner phone, or am I bringing my laptop with me? There are so many things that are happening that are cross-pollinating within law that where I didn't think I had to be a constitutional scholar, and nor do I consider myself one. It is something that I have to take into consideration when I am talking to my clients about traveling outside of the United States. Birthright citizenship, right? That was one of his big games right off the bat. Well, you know, if you're born in the U.S., maybe you're not a U.S. citizen. Well, the Constitution says you are. And the judges kind of said, you can't do that. And we know that that's going up to the Supreme Court. So these are really, again, intense legal issues that we're trying to communicate with our communities who are having children in the United States and saying, can I get a passport even though I'm not documented, but my child was born here? There was an executive order to tell the Department of State to not issue passports to individuals if their parents could not establish their status in the United States. That had never happened before. And so again, communities are trying to figure out, well, if I have to go back, whether I self-deport, which is a whole problematic concept, but if I return, or if I am returned against my will, what about my U.S. citizen children? If they don't have U.S. passports, how are they going to travel back and be reunited with their loved ones in their home countries? So again, the area of what we know about immigration law and how I've practiced it in 23 years has really been thrown a major curve. And trying to stay up on that is one of the greatest challenges I have as a practitioner. So executive orders. Again, these are powers that are not law. They are policies. And again, luckily we have amazing litigators nationally that are saying, you can't do that. ACLU says you can't do that. And we have people fighting and watching really the campaign promise that he said he wasn't connected to the 2025 project. He's taking it right out of their playbook. And I was at a national conference last year in Chicago before the election, and we started digesting that and going, okay, where are we going with this if we are not successful in overcoming this administration? And so our next conference is in Denver, where again, a lot of heat is coming down as far as their practices and protocols. And we are trying to focus on wellness. I'll be very honest. That is one of the key themes that immigration lawyers are trying to incorporate into our practices, is if we are not all well, how can we help those that we are trying to protect and provide support for? So the fact that you are all here today makes me breathe the sigh of, we are gonna be okay. All right, so thank you for being here today and showing up for your community, because that is what we have to do, because people are relying on us to do that. Again, major tracks of immigration. We have family-based immigration, sort of a real quick snip I showed you as far as marriage to a U.S. citizen, a fiance-based petition. Yes, the 90-day fiance, that's a real thing. Bringing somebody in and having to marry that individual within 90 days, following the rules to make sure that you meet all of the marks to get your loved one here in the United States. What I think people don't understand is that just because you marry a United States citizen, you don't get any status. There is applications, there are processes. What if you came to the United States without permission and you fell in love and started a family? That hurdle is extremely challenging to overcome, and just because you married a U.S. citizen or just because you have 4 beautiful U.S. citizen children, those individuals don't keep you in the United States if a removal proceeding is started against you. And to just petition and start to try to secure the status of your loved ones is extremely challenging. There are waivers that applications and families can apply for to overcome their immigration infractions. You'll note that I really stay away from the word illegal because I think it's a misuse of the term. We are talking about a civil process. These are civil infractions. They are not criminal. And in that sense, when somebody is placed into deportation proceedings, while they have the right to hire an attorney, they do not have the right to a court-appointed representation. Where in criminal courts, you get that right? You have the opportunity to have a public defender or somebody that you can afford to represent you. But if you think about the consequence of a removal proceeding, deportation for some individuals is a death sentence. And it's very serious, but no right to have an automatic attorney assigned to you. And we're seeing this with unaccompanied minors, right? I mean, these horrific stories and visuals of 3-year-olds sitting with headphones on, talking to a judge, having no idea what is happening, have come miles and miles to survive, and now have to defend themselves because the unaccompanied minor programs have been slashed in funding. It's heavy. This is. I'm gonna find some bright spots. I promise. I will. So, family-based trees. I think what is also hard to kind of conceptualize is that what we identify as family is very nuclear-based. And so it has to be either the parent of a United States citizen, the spouse of a United States citizen, those are deemed, or a child of a United States citizens. Those are immediate relatives. And that means there's not supposed to be a backlog. Okay, gotcha. So that could still be a 2-year separation when trying to connect families. But what about my sibling? Sometimes I feel like siblings are closer relationships than any other person in a family. But for example, when a sibling who is here in the United States, let's say from Mexico, because they have their own distinct preference category number, if a sibling is applying for a benefit for an individual living in Mexico based on that biological relationship, the petition itself takes 20 years to be adjudicated. So again, we're talking about a system where there are designated numbers each year that Congress that can be filled. And when those backlogs develop, that's when we have 20-year waits. Countries that are subject to their own preference category numbers include Mexico, China, the Philippines, and India. So if you're coming from one of those countries that are not identified, maybe things only take 15 years, or maybe 6 years. And families are, trying to make the best of those circumstances. But aunts and uncles, cousins, nephews, grandparents, they are not included in these petitioning processes. Then there's a whole camp of employment-based visas. And this is something that never really was of interest to me, and my former spouse is like, and that's why you make no money. But again, the employment side are really, right, maybe the tech jobs, maybe the high industry, extraordinary ability professors, doctors, scholars, people who are working for NASA, people who are working on nuclear science, things of that nature. You can get specialty visas based on employment. And we're gonna let John talk a little bit more about what does that look like on a farm, and where does this fall with agriculture, which is the bread and butter of so many of our communities, but particular type of visas are just not available, nor are they created. And so how do we value labor in the United States? How do we value manufacturing? How do we value all of the things that keep us going on a regular basis? And there just aren't enough employees for them. And so we look to other labor sources. But again, immigration law doesn't value those individuals to the same level as they do high-level scholars. And I'm not taking anything away from high-level scholars, because they bring a lot of really positive aspects to innovation and tech and science and things of that, and I don't want to lose that. But we are going to lose that. This is part of the problem, is that when we tell students who have a voice on their campuses that their voices should be silenced, and we start to take their visas and their status away from them, we're going to find less and less students coming to the United States to bring their brains. And I do think in the long term we are going to have an impact on where I think we are number one in a lot of things. We're gonna feel the impact of not encouraging international students to come and be present and learn from the best, because we're not going to be the best anymore. Student visas, tourist visas, ESTA program. So an ESTA program is where if you and I have a passport in the United States, I can get on a plane and go to Spain without any visa. This is a reciprocity-based relationship, and so we recognize certain countries in the community of the global community that we don't have to go and get a visa to go and visit. And there are certain countries that then can send their individuals here to visit the United States for up to 90 days, and then they return to their home countries. It's a glorified tourist visa, but it's one opportunity for people to travel internationally. Then there's this whole aspect of humanitarian visas, and this is where my passion was when I got into immigration law. So it started with deportation defense, and I was able to represent individuals that were seeking asylum, or people who had experienced internal violence within their relationships here in the United States, and that's called the Violence Against Women Act. Not defined only by women, because I actually work with many men who have experienced interpersonal violence against them. And so the Violence Against Women Act, refugees, asylum, U visas, being a victim of a crime here in the United States, that's probably the largest thing that I do. I work with families who have experienced violence here in the United States, have reported that violence, have cooperated with law enforcement to make our communities safer. And that's the thing about a U visa, is that it brings people out of the shadows. And this type of administration puts people back in the shadows. And so I'm guaranteeing that we will see an increase in domestic violence. I'm guaranteeing we're going to see an increase in child abuse. We are going to see things go terribly wrong because people don't want to report. They're afraid. Are their local police and their sheriffs, are they on board with ICE? What are these directives? There was a rally today in Madison just for this purpose, because they're trying to say, sheriffs, you have to play by the rules of the Department of Homeland Security. And many sheriffs in many communities are saying, we are going to take care of our communities. We are not going to participate in ICE enforcement. So, you're right, it's top heavy in the enforcement actions that are going on right now. Temporary protected status, again, just kind of going down the line here. This is one of the pieces that we have to start scratching off countries, in particular Afghanistan. So for all of those individuals who helped us fight a war for 20 years, that got refuge, that were able to climb onto a plane and evacuate, if you remember that from 2 years ago, who safely landed and went to Fort McCoy, those individuals who were able to seek temporary protected status, the government, Ms. Noem, has now told me and us that Afghanistan is safe for women. They can go back. The Taliban has got this under control. And so no more TPS for those who have had that with being from Afghanistan. I believe Cameroon is probably the next country that is going to be seeing that eliminated. Venezuela, that will continue for a little bit because there was some legal battles around that, and Haiti as well. So again, TPS, while temporary in nature, and I understand the definition of temporary, sometimes things don't get better. And sometimes we have to continue to look at what draws people to the United States and why are people fleeing their homes. I think it's a misunderstanding and a myth that people are coming here to invade our country, to harm us, and engage in criminal activity. Yes, there's a small component of that. And there are many people who are born in the United States who engage in criminal activity. So, all of that being said, I think we have to shift how we are talking about these issues and what draws people here. I have to tell this story that my 15-year-old who's playing a baseball game right now, and he's like, "You're not gonna be there tonight, Mama?" I'm like, "You put it on video and I'll watch it when I get done." He did a presentation on global migration to the Dane County Overture Center in Madison. And he talked about what draws people here and climate change, why things are drying up, why people can't farm the way that they need to. What does violence look like in their home communities when they hear about being safe in the United States? And they come through the Darien Pass. If you have not heard this article and this piece in the New Yorker about the Darien Pass, where people come from Colombia up through Central America, lives are lost along the way to make it here. I have worked with middle school students, and we do an experiment, or I try to talk to them about, if you only had one thing, if you only had a backpack, and it's all you could bring from your home, what would you put in it? And it really helps kids connect to their neighbors and their new students and their new arrivals who don't speak the language next to them. But smiling at these new family members who are present in their communities, saying, that must have been really hard for you, even if they don't understand the language, to show compassion. But to hear a 12-year-old talk about that and talk about why people come, like if a 12-year-old can figure it out, what's going on, right? And I think that we have to continue to talk about what draws people here and want to be in the United States. DED, that's a program that the president can use. It's kind of a watered down version of temporary protected status. But what makes it different is that it's a presidential, it's a power within international law that says, if there's something in the community in which you're in and we don't think we can return you, we can keep you safe. And so we did actually identify individuals who were present in the United States from Palestine. They were able to obtain DED, and folks who were present in the United States from Lebanon. Parole programs, again, have been slashed. I think parole has become a dirty word for this administration. And they think that all of the people who are coming here on parole, again, engaged in fraud and are here to harm us. And so the Cuban, Nicaraguan, Haitian, Venezuelan program has been eliminated. United for Ukraine has been eliminated. HP, or humanitarian parole for Afghans, has been eliminated. It's just it's a chopping block for these programs, which actually created orderly entry into the United States. So if the idea was that people are coming in mass surges and we just don't know who they are, these programs were trying to eliminate that by having a sponsor in the United States say, I will take some responsibility for this individual. And those individuals were vetted before they came to the United States. I think, again, that is lost, is that people who apply for visas to come to the United States, massive background checks go on. Interpol, I don't know how anybody gets here, to be honest. Sometimes I wonder about the security checks and how somebody manages to make it through some of these rigorous expectations. DACA, still alive, okay? So we still have DACA. Unfortunately, it's only a 2-year program. I'm hoping that it manages to stay. I hope that Congress can figure this one out and create a plan to make individuals who have been here since they were young adults and young children, really who are the fabric of our community, make them feel secure. But as of right now, DACA has not been attacked. Citizenship. What I can tell you is where I am finding individuals who for so long should probably have become US citizens who are now applying. We are going back and reviewing applications from when they first came to the United States, because this administration is about unraveling. They want to establish that something along the way was not done right. So I have individuals who are making that decision between renewing their green card, because there's a little bit less scrutiny, and applying for citizenship when they know what is the value of being a US citizen, is that supposedly you can't be deported anymore, and two, you get to vote, right? Like the power for all of us to be here and vote and have a say in who's writing these rules and who's running these administrations. That is a power that they have nothing to say when you are a permanent resident or a visa holder, but you're subject to all of the rules that apply to you. And resources, I'm happy to talk about resources, and I will do that at the end and talk to you about resources as Dave and I were chatting about. I am part of a community group out of Dane County who has now expanded into Southwest Wisconsin, and we're doing quarterly walk-in clinics for individuals who are documented or undocumented, and they get a free consultation with an immigration lawyer. We're trying to bring that north. So stay tuned, and again, there are ways for us to connect and get this information out to the communities. So I think I'm at 30. So, we're good? Okay, all right.
Well, you did bring that last ray of sunshine in. Thank you very much. So we're going to go to our panel of local speakers right now representing farms, faith, and community education. And up first will be John Rosenau, who is the owner of Rosenholm Dairy in Wamandee, Wisconsin. I can vouch for the wonderful compost that he makes. And we will be contacting you to get some more, John. So each of our speakers will have 12 minutes, and the timekeeper will help keep you on the rails here. So I'll turn this over to John.
Thank you. I'm just going to tell 3 stories. The first one, when I went to Mexico the first time to learn the language, and I failed miserably, but I went. And we had a speaker called Nelly Salgado who came and spoke to us. Nelly has done a lot of research on the people that are left behind in Mexico, that their spouses or their family heads north and they remain in Mexico. And so she traveled up into the mountains and she created a relationship with this lady, and the lady had a son and a daughter. And they were very small at the time, and Nellie got what she needed up there and went back to Mexico City and also to Austin, Texas, where she also teaches at the University of Texas. And a couple years later, she went back to the same village and saw the lady that she had befriended. And she noticed the lady only had a son following her around. And so she asked the lady, what happened? And where's your daughter? And the lady said, I had to, they both got sick. My son and my daughter got sick. And I only had money to choose to take one of them to the doctor. So I took the boy to the doctor because he maybe someday will go up north and we'll be able to have a better life. So she had to make a decision that none of us ever want to make. And I'm sure she wouldn't want to either. The second story is about Roberto Tecpile. He's in the book Milked, along with his brother or son Kevin. Both of them work on our farm, and Roberto and I have become close friends. And he's also my golf partner. When Roberto was very young, he lived with his parents, Concepcion and Gerardo. And Roberto was like the oldest of about 9 children. When he was about 5 or 6 years old, they lived in a kind of a small shack, his words. And it was covered with a blue tarp as a roof. And being 6 years old, he enjoyed that because he could see the stars and he could see the moon, and he really enjoyed that. But one night, a storm came through and it hailed the blue tarp, and the whole house was inundated with hail and rain. And Roberto could see that his mother was very, very sad, as you can imagine. And he went up to his mother and he said, when I get old, I'm going to build you a house that has a roof, a concrete roof, so that you don't never have to go through this again. And so then we flash forward. Roberto came to the United States the first time when he was, I think, in his teens, late teens, and worked at different places. Eventually, after a number of years, he found work in Blair, Wisconsin on a dairy farm, and eventually came to our farm about 10 years ago. And during that time that he's working up north, he sent money home to his wife, Veronica. Veronica built themselves a home, and at one time they were supporting 17 people in this village, and from the money that Roberto was making on our farm. And now, today, he did build a house for his mother and his father, Gerardo and Concepcion, and they now have a concrete roof, and if a hailstorm comes, they're going to be good. So Roberto did what he said, and he's like one of the best people that you'll ever know. The third story is a person named Severo. He's worked for us for about 25 years, and he milks he starts at 2 o'clock, 2:30 in the morning, comes and milks till about 10 with a break in between. He comes back and does other things, and he's been doing that for about 25 years. A great guy. He does not read, he does not write, but he sends money home to his wife, Maria Primitiva. Maria Primitiva is a no-nonsense type of person, but she's taken these thousands of dollars that Severo has sent home. She's helped her sons, Juan and Federico, who also worked on our farm, as well as Hermenhildo, who's also working right now, and raised them basically by herself, because Severo was sending the money, Maria Primitiva was doing the work at home and raising the family. And along with raising the family, she built a home for Federico, she built a home for Juan, now she's building one for herself and for Severo with a garage. And these people are so, they've taken thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars and been good stewards of it. The reason I know this story is because another person that works for us, Omar, when he was very young, his mother went a Lagaria, went to the United States. So he was, he didn't have a mother. And so Maria Primitiva raised Omar as one of her own. And when Omar talks about Maria Primitiva, he can't look up because he has such respect for her. So those are my three stories.
Thank you, John. All right, next on our panel is Dave Anderson, who I assume a lot of you know in this room. He was the pastor here. And he is currently a member of the Immigration Task Force for Jonah. Okay, all right, take it away.
Good evening. There's three people back there who I'm not going to name because this will be broadcast, who could also all be up here doing this, but I want them to raise their hands. Also the person have helped with our Immigration Task Force for 15 years, have helped settle Afghan refugees, been involved in all of these things. We started working in immigration about 15 years ago, so if I dedicate 1 minute to each year, I think I'll do okay. We got involved because my wife was at a meeting and met a dairy farm worker's son, heard how terrified he was when his mother would drive to get groceries because he was afraid she would be pulled over by the police and arrested for driving without a license. He was a high school student and he teared up. He was so worried. And we were like, what's that about? Do you know about the driver's license situation? After 9/11, the Congress passed the Real ID Act and asked the states to come up with a timeline and a plan to require an ID that reflected your citizenship. Before this, people who were here without documents could obtain a driver's license and drive legally. When Wisconsin adopted that, I think in 2013, they couldn't get licensed, they couldn't renew licenses or get licenses anymore. That meant everybody that had to drive, and that's everybody in Wisconsin just about, to the grocery store, to the doctor, to school, to work, constantly felt afraid that they would get pulled over. Once, okay, twice, okay. The rumor at that time was 3 times and you might face deportation. That isn't exactly right, but that was what people believed. And so we saw all this fear and we went out to talk to people about this. You know, before we jumped in with both feet, we wanted to know what the Spanish-speaking community said was their worst fear, and this was what came back to us all the time. So our first work was to work to get the legislature in Wisconsin to pass an exception. There's the Real ID Act is that states can issue another kind of driver's license or ID that allows people without the documents to drive, but it specifies that they can't vote. They can't use it to fly in a plane. Last I looked, 18 states have passed this. It's failed every time that it's come up before the Wisconsin legislature. So that was causing a lot of fear. And obviously we've been extremely unsuccessful in our efforts to get that changed. So then we said, what else can we do? How can we address the fear? And we began to talk to local law enforcement and to the Latino community and said, let's just get them in the same room together to address this so that law enforcement knows what's going on with the fear and people know just what will happen. And so it was in this room that we had the first of our meetings. And lots of questions. And we were assured at that time that our local law enforcement is not interested in immigration status. They see concern with immigration status as being very unhelpful in terms of trying to protect people. People don't want to be witnesses. People don't want to report crimes. They still felt obligated to pull you over if you were doing something and discovered that you didn't have a driver's license, but we began to create understanding. Then we decided that we're with the Spanish-speaking community, we need to have a fiesta. So we brought the police together with the Spanish-speaking community out in this parking lot to have a fiesta and just get to sit down at a table and talk to one another. That's been one of our goals all along, is talk to someone who's from a different country, get to know them. You can't dislike them anymore or suspect them if you talk to them. That grew into what now is the Chippewa Valley Multicultural Festival down at Phoenix Park. I don't know if anybody's ever been to that. We had 5 ethnicities. We try to get people to understand each other's culture, understand each other, and talk to one another. That's been a really fun kind of thing. One of our big benefits, because of talking to immigrants that are living here, is we get invited to quinceañeras, we get invited to baptisms and weddings and confirmations, and it's a lovely community. If you have a chance to sit down with someone that is from a Spanish-speaking country, or any country for that matter, get to know them. The other thing that we got much more involved in was safety. We began hearing stories, the last, Trump 1.0, began hearing stories of people that would come up to adults on the playground, children that would come up to adults on the playground and say, if my parents are taken, would you take care of me? And, so I think I just lost, hello? There it is. How to address these kinds of fears and how to help people feel safe at a time that's designed to make them feel unsafe and unsure of themselves. Let me backtrack. So we've kept up relationships with the Sheriff's Department, the Police Department, the Altoona Police Department, who all have assured us within the last 2 months we are not interested in immigration status of anyone that we stop for any reason. We are not interested in cooperating with ICE. That would go against everything that we believe we're in this community for. It's not true everywhere, but we live in a pretty good island of safety in those terms. So, protect people. We started realizing that we needed to teach people about their rights. And so we began distributing right cards. We began having, the first time around, we had meetings in places like this. Now we don't want to draw people together, so we try to distribute information through Mexican grocery stores, through different websites about how to protect your rights. Another thing we're interested in doing is helping families prepare for some member being deported, and have worked with family practice lawyers to prepare guardianship sorts of documents. All these things that we do are scary for people to do. And so it's you walk a fine line between scaring people and saying maybe what you know is going to keep you safe. When there's a rumor that ICE is present, everything goes crazy here. Kids don't go to school. We got phone calls from people saying, I'm afraid to go to the grocery store. Is there anyone that can go to the grocery store for me? I'm afraid to pick up my kids at school. And so we're working on developing a group that will try to keep track of ICE presence and report back, is this a serious threat? Is this just a rumor that's going around? Because we get lots and lots of rumors. I think people like to stir those things up on their own. We got a picture, last time we heard that ICE was here, of a convoy of ICE vehicles on Cameron Street. It turned out it was from Waukesha. Somebody just wanted to scare people around Eau Claire. So we develop a group that will try to confirm or disprove whether there is a threat or not in the community. Another thing we've done, how much time do I have left? One? All right. Another thing that happened is we heard that the Mexican consulate was looking for some place to have a mobile consulate. They're located in St. Paul. And so we said, let's bring them to this church because it'd be nice to have some place that people identified as safe. And it's right by the interstate and Highway 93 and Highway 53. It's easy to get to. So for, I think, about 13 years, the Mexican consulate has come here once a year. Help people with paperwork, renew passports, renew their identity cards and matriculares, register births, and things like that. And we've tried at times when it felt safe to bring people from this community into what we do best, serve coffee and cookies, and see that we have this wonderful population of Spanish-speaking people here. So safety, information, and working on driver's licenses is us.
Thank you, Dave. Keep those questions coming. I see we have a nice little handful there. So if you do have a question, just wave it in the air, your card, and somebody will come and pick it up. All right, our last speaker on the panel is Elizabeth Hart, and she is the Executive Director of Literacy Chippewa Valley.
Well, thank you for inviting me to speak. I'll tell you a little bit about what we do at LCV. Literacy Chippewa Valley has been in existence since 1986, so it's a long time. I think we're over 35 years now. And we originally started to help the Hmong refugees that came in the 80s. And then they didn't really need us anymore, and then we started seeing a lot of Spanish speakers. And now we're seeing lots of war refugees. And so it's been a real privilege to be in this organization and provide a haven for people to come and improve their education skills. And so what we do for immigrants is we have an English language learning class in the morning from 9 to 12, and then we have one in the evening from 6 to 7:30. Both are with childcare, so if a person has young children that prevents them from getting English skills, we can take care of that. And it's a real Tower of Babel in our English language learning class. I think right now we have 8 different languages. But it's also really nice to see people interact with each other and find a way to understand and find some common ground and some community in their attempts to learn English. But along with learning English, what we also do is try to teach people how to live in this community, and that's all very indirect. It's things that come up that people need assistance with. For example, getting a driver's license, or first of all, getting to class. Eau Claire is not an easy community to get around. We do have a bus system, but the bus doesn't go everywhere. And so getting people to class is one thing, getting them to a high-paying job is another thing. So the first challenge for a lot of people after starting to work on their English is to try to get a driver's license. And even that poses lots of barriers because you need learning materials in the language that the person speaks. They also have to find drive time. They have to find a vehicle to practice on. All those things are barriers for people. So then they work on their driver's license, get their driver's license, or get a job where they can take the bus. And there have been some real great places that have taken a lot of immigrants to work. Walmart is an example. That's a great entry place for immigrants. Not easy to get to. They usually have to work the night shift stocking shelves. And then people try to get over to Menards. Menards has also taken a lot of immigrants, and it's also a great place to work because they have benefits. So bit by bit, everybody's finding their way into the community. And then parents of young children have to get into the school district. We have a wonderful school district, a wonderful staff that I think almost all of the elementary schools, all of the schools now have an ELL specialist. That's really new. I mean, I grew up here in Eau Claire, and it wasn't that way when I was growing up. And so I do feel this is a really welcoming community. And so eventually, it's amazing to see the kids, how fast they pick up on English, especially little kids. They'll go to 1 year of kindergarten and come back and be more fluent than their parents. Young people can learn languages so quickly, so that's kind of nice to see. And so we just really do what we can and try to figure out what people's needs are, if they're trying to find a home or a better living situation. We just try to keep our ears open and provide different needs for people. And then maybe after 7 years, people start working on their citizenship and try to become citizens in this country. Now, we can't really do much about immigration law. I mean, we can only deal with the people that come in our door, so we don't always know if people are afraid to come to our class. We suspect it. We've got our regular students, and then of course we have students who do have refugee status, who have an I-94. They come in and they're basically already citizens. They have work permits, they can get a job. They still have a lot of those cultural barriers that they have to get through. But we do have to keep very particular track of every class they attend. Everything they do is marked in a database, and that's how we get our funding. So it wasn't always that way either. I think some of the initial groups that came in, for example, Ukraine, a lot of Ukrainians came in at first and nobody knew where they went. And so I think after that, when we started seeing other people, other ethnic groups coming in, then they really wanted us to keep track of what was happening with them, and if they received services, that's what we do. So it's all really bittersweet. We hear a lot of tough stories, but we also see people having success and integrating into the community, getting jobs, getting vehicles, getting their kids into school, seeing their kids and hearing how well they speak English. And so from that, we take pride and we feel success and we feel happiness for these people. But we know that there's a lot of things that we can't control and that we don't know about. People that came for a while but then sort of disappeared. And so we don't track people down. We don't ask too many questions either. We just serve whoever comes in. So we tend to have, our economic migrants, and then we have our refugees. And then we still get a lot of Hmong people coming over, even though they're in their third generation now, and there's a really beautiful community that people can integrate into. So it's interesting to see people come over, usually young brides who come over and marry someone. So we have whoever comes in and whoever needs English and education services, we're happy to provide them. And this year has been a really big year for us. We had a lot of refugees because World Relief was in town, although now that office has really decreased in size. They've had to cut their staff because they've just cut all those pipelines, and there won't be any new refugees coming in, as we are told. That could change, we just don't know. So anyway. But we're here and we serve whoever comes in. So, thanks for being a good community.
Thank you, Elizabeth. All right, we will now answer the questions as you've written down on the cards when we've gotten through all of those. And is that a question in your hand? Okay, great. Then we'll go to questions from the floor. So I'm gonna, yes? Anybody else, as long as I'm walking this way?
I think you said, Lori, that we have 20 minutes for the questions?
At least 20 minutes. I mean, we have until 7:30.
Okay, so we have a little more time. And there are so many questions here that I'm going to have someone draw one of these questions. So I can start it? Okay, start with that one. I think I'll read the question and then look at the four of you to see who would like to answer it. Rather than assigning you a question that you have no background in or whatever. So that might be more fair. This one. Oh, come on. Is anyone under 50 who is here? Under 50?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, the answer to that is yes. For Attorney Generman, any suggestions, for a strike force when someone is picked up? I'm only reading what's on the card.
We're working with Joe and Bill knows about that too. And we want to get a group together so that when someone's picked up, we can deal with it immediately.
You don't mean you're gonna punch out the person who picked them up? We're going to stay on the legal side.
That sounds good. So definitely being present when something like that is happening is important on who are you sending, right? Making sure that you're sending individuals who have status, who are U.S. citizens, and making sure, I think the goal is always to, if you're recording, that you are recording the officer and trying to focus on that, remaining calm. So Voces de la Frontera is, again, the organization out of Milwaukee that does all of these different trainings. And if you haven't connected with them, you should. If you are, awesome. Luis and their team go around and talk about this type of protocol exactly and how to have community response. And I do think being present and verifying what Dave was saying is, because it creates such chaos, is making sure that you have that line of attack. So you know who's gonna go out and see to confirm whether or not this is happening. And then a lot of organizations are using Signal or other encrypted apps to communicate with with the community to say, this is verified, this is what's going on. So definitely I'll hand this over to Dave, but I think working collectively and making sure the message is the same is really important, and I think messaging is really important. That everybody's getting the same message, that this is how we're going to respond. Because if you have too many pots in the kitchen at right hands, it gets a little murky, and you want to make sure you have a direct line of how you're going to respond appropriately and to remain as calm as possible when that's happening, as emotional as that might be.
There are actually some volunteers in this room that have volunteered to go and see where ICE is and confirm what they're doing. And we'll be having to have periodic training on how to keep yourself safe in those situations, because this is one thing that isn't for the faint-hearted, that they can be a very threatening presence. We also are looking at trying to get a group of people that would file habeas petitions immediately after someone is taken, which gets, tell me if I'm wrong, makes sure that a person appears in court and doesn't just disappear. One of the things that happens when people appear in court is that they get on a docket and they can wait for 4 years and be here for a little while and not disappear. Who knows? Maybe things will change in 4 years. Then we also want to start putting together teams that stop by where there's a family. And how do you contact someone in detention? Where do you get community resources? Those kinds of things. And we did a little of that in 2017. So we've had a little experience, but we need to build some teams.
Thank you, okay. How about you pick one? Does it make sense to encourage and provide access to citizenship education materials for those on temporary status? And how can we get the money for these materials?
I'll take that question just because it's what we do. I think that it is very important for people to have the materials to study for, even if they're on temporary status, because it teaches a lot of history about the government in the United States. People have to learn about 100 questions that can be randomly picked during their test to see, and they're not easy. Sometimes when we do presentations, we provide a mock exam for everybody, and it's interesting to see how many answers people don't know. But just about our government and things that you would want to know, and I think knowledge is power, and just even if you're not, if you have temporary status, it's important to know the rules of the country that you're living in and how to get citizenship, I guess.
And we have those resources. And tutors.
Okay,
How do you get the money for those materials?
I can ask that.
So actually, a lot of this stuff is free. The materials depend, I mean, I know that teaching is not free, and I'm not asking that to be free, but what I'm saying is that the citizenship application test and questions, all of that is on uscis.gov, which is their website, and you can download those questions in different languages. So to prepare for citizenship, there are things online that are free. So that is positive. So that's what I would say. And there are now apps that have it. And so again, these things are becoming more accessible under the circumstance. If you are applying to become a US citizen, it's currently $760. So we also talk about that with my clients. Unless you are at a certain level within under the poverty guideline, then it's $380. So we always evaluate tax returns when we are moving forward to try to reduce fees for individuals who qualify.
Can I just ask a side question? How about volunteering to be a teacher for some of these people? Is that something you're looking for?
Again, that's one of the
Things that Literacy Chippewa Valley does, we provide one-to-one tutoring on any topic, really. So if you are interested in teaching citizenship, we can do it one-on-one or in small groups. Sir, what was your question in the red? Did you have a question? Oh, okay, yeah. And if someone asked where the money comes from, like LCV is a nonprofit, so we receive our funding from largely community donations and grants. So then it's divided up amongst our 3 programs, and we just make it work. But if someone wants a teacher, it would be a volunteer. So then community members come in and volunteer.
next time, Steve, write it down, take your chances. How are the current actions of our government going to impact farmers, seeking workers, and other employees? Oh, I know who gets to answer this one.
I don't know. So far, there's been one enforcement action in the country on dairy farms, and that was in Vermont. And it was right on the border at the largest dairy farm in Vermont. They picked up 8 people. 3 of them have been deported. The other 5, we don't know the status of them. That farm had approximately, I just figured it out from how many cows you have and how many employees you have, about 60 employees, and most of them, if it's typical of all farms in the United States, were immigrants, and probably most of them undocumented. So why they took 8 and didn't take the 60, I don't know. But being an optimist, I'm hoping that this will be a trend that they aren't going to do much with us. But we'll see. Last time, nothing happened. So, last time he was president.
Who will pick a card here?
Could I add something to that? There is no legal path to full-time farm work. You can get temporary farm work, picking berries or things like that, returning after 6 months, but there's no full-time path for, and 70 to 80% of our milk is harvested in Wisconsin, isn't that right? By immigrant labor.
It's very clear that neither party wants to solve the immigration problem. How can that be changed?
I absolutely agree with that statement. And I think that this has become an extremely polarized issue. I think it's a misunderstood issue, and it serves both parties to not fix it. And that's a really hard place for me to sit, because I would like to believe that comprehensive immigration reform that I've been saying out loud for 20 years would eventually happen by now. But we just don't have the temperament for it. And I think that what we need are representatives who are not afraid to highlight the contributions of our immigrant communities. And I think that is where the Democratic Party failed this time around. I think that we got bought into, I shouldn't say we, I think the Democratic Party was unable to separate the rhetoric. And instead of highlighting the positive qualities and the needs that we need and have, and the contributions. I mean, I think that's what's frustrating to me, is that there's no recognition of the positive pieces that our society gets when we incorporate different opinions, different cultures, different views. I think Trevor Noah said it best, like, there's nothing more American than tacos. Like, there's something about that. And I just, right, like I have to find space in that to say, we have to start putting these communities and the individuals that we love and that we are connected to, and start showing what these positive contributions are. And then we have to have representatives who are willing to stand up and do that. And I think that, unfortunately, that is where the fail has been. And I think it will continue to be a left-right issue. And I think it's problematic, absolutely.
Anybody else want to speak to that?
Part of that is just changing the narrative, and so, kind of like you said, we would talk to Republican legislators about the driver's license bill frequently, point out all the advantages of having people knowledgeable about the cars that they drive, the fewer hit and runs, people buying insurance. Law enforcement likes it because they have good identification piece of information. And very often from legislators we'd say, well, we understand that, we agree with you, but our constituents would hang us out to dry.
And who taught their constituents to have that attitude?
That's it. That's it.
Okay, there are two questions here on this one card. A day or two ago, we witnessed Afrikaners receiving a fast track to America. For me, this appears wrong. Please comment. And the second question, when I see ICE officers handling people, I think of mid-1930s Germany. Are my observations with merit?
So that was a two-part question. And I can't remember the first part. Oh, the Afrikaners, okay. So you addressed the refugee populations, and the reality is, yes, as of January 20th, all refugees who were already vetted and getting on airplanes were told they could not get on the airplanes to come to the United States to enter into the refugee resettlement program. So 100, I believe the initial response or the initial position was 120 days, and then we will reevaluate the situation. And then the administration got wind that there was a community in South Africa that seems to be disproportionately harmed by post-apartheid situation, and therefore we're going to welcome South African individuals who are of European descent. And so a large amount of them just arrived, and many communities are not, like the refugee resettlement programs are saying, we're not working with these individuals. This is an abuse of the process. It is a misuse of the concept of refugee. And I just want to distinguish when we talk about refugee versus asylum, because I think that's something people sometimes get confused about, is that refugee status is when you are present outside of the United States and you are fleeing a circumstance based on one of 5 grounds of national origin, political opinion, membership in a social group, religion, or national or race. And so if you are being targeted because of that outside of the country, you go to kind of a vetting area to try to come into the United States as a refugee, versus individuals who are present already in the United States or presenting themselves at the border. That's when somebody is seeking asylum. The concept itself is the same, the analysis is the same, but it just is where you are asking for that benefit. But sometimes I think people get confused about that, so I think it's an important distinction to be made. And then there was a second part of that. Oh, the 1930s, okay, right. So I think one of the most disturbing things, and there's a lot of disturbing things to reflect upon, but watching the young woman in Boston, the Turkish student who has been freed, and that is a colleague of mine who represented her, and it's just an amazing fight in that sense. But to watch somebody with half-masked, I mean, USCIS, DHS officers are wearing half masks. Why? What is that about? Right? Because what are they doing in that sense? They are detaining somebody on the side of the street, not telling the individual who they are. I mean, it's frightening. And so, I mean, I had an opportunity to speak to PBS about this in Wisconsin, and the last question was, you know, do you think students should be staying at home? Do you think they should be looking over their shoulder? And my response was yes. We have set them up to be afraid, and we are showing them that we are willing to take them off the street in this manner. And so, again, this is not what ICE looked like the last administration. This is not what ICE has ever really looked like. And yet, more people have been deported under the Biden administration up to this point than this Trump administration. And I think we have to kind of like hold responsibility where it is. But again, the tenor and the approach of removing people has been extremely different.
Isn't that because it's a demonstration to the country? John, how are your farm workers treated by the community at large?
I mean, over the last 25 years, we've had incidents where they weren't treated very well. But I think by and large, we're getting more and more people understanding the situation. We have people, this time of year we're selling a lot of compost and potting soil, and people come to our farm to buy it from us because that's one of our businesses. And people come, I can tell that they probably voted a different way than I voted. And but they always comment that we need to get rid of the drug people, we need to get rid of the gangs and stuff like that. And my comment is, well, we always wanted to do that, every president wants to do that, but we don't want to touch your guys. And so there's an understanding of that, and I don't know. Like we talked before, that somebody mentioned before that they had cars driving through town that probably were ICE people, but they really were from Waukesha. I think we need to be really concerned as individuals of spreading these rumors, creating fear where the fear shouldn't exist. And so I maybe am naive, or I don't get out in the community as much as I should, or whatever, like I want to. But people are getting to know the Robertos and the Kevins, and Kevin deals with almost all the customers that come to our farm to deal with compost, and I make a point of that. And he knows a little bit of English, and everybody leaves with a positive experience. And I can only do it, make changes in this world one person at a time. That's what we're trying to do.
Okay, since the USA needs so many workers, why can't people just get a worker permit and be able to go back and forth from their countries without worry? Hearing about people not seeing their families for years is so tragic.
Yes.
Normally when I come to something like this, Roberto comes along, Roberto Tecpili, and he tells his story. And he tells a story of leaving home when his daughter Megan was 6 months old, and now she's 10 years old, or 11 years old. We were there in Mexico in February, and she sang the national anthem of Mexico in Nahua to us, which was incredible, and it's quite long, and she did a great job. But people ask him, now, when are you going to go home? When are you going to go home? And of course, that's an important issue for Roberto, but it is a $1,000,000 or $100,000 question. So if he leaves, the income that he's sending home is taken away from their family. So their family goes from middle class back down to less than middle class someplace. He probably makes about $45,000 a year plus a place to stay, plus electricity and heat. So, and he has very few expenses. So he's probably sending $30,000 a year home. So is his son Kevin. So they live a good life down there compared to what they used to. And I think we need to understand that this is a special relationship, a special marriage, where there are two roles. Roberto's role is to make the money, and his wife Veronica is to take the money and build a family. And we've had a lot of experience where people have really done that. One of the things that the Puentes organization, which I'm involved with, and Mercedes Falk, who's here somewhere, are doing is we've created an exhibit where we have taken the stories of the women back in Mexico, the Veronicas, the Oligarias, the Marina Primitivas, the Concepciones, the Fatima. They each have a story, and so we've taken a photo of them and created a exhibit which will be at the UW Eau Claire McIntyre Library this October, with their story on one side in English and the other side in Spanish, and their photo in the middle. They are some real heroes.
This question is for Elizabeth Hunt. Is Literacy Chippewa Valley the newer name for literacy volunteers? And there are two short questions to follow.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
We renamed it. I think they renamed it because they wanted people to understand that while we... Here, you can look at the rest of it all. Okay.
We changed it to literacy volunteers because they wanted people to understand that while we utilize volunteers, that there are also paid staff with education and credentials in the area that they're working. So they wanted to upgrade, I think, the public perception. Are individual tutoring sessions available? Yes. I'm not sure if this means training for the tutors. All of our tutors do go through a training. And you can tutor an individual, and we do have small group tutoring as well. And the second question is, are the group lessons focusing on conversational English, reading, or something else? All of the above. They really are. The curriculum that we use is contextualized for the workforce and also just practical life. But we also, in addition to teaching English, we're trying to teach people how to live in this community, and there are lots of things that are different because struggling with low literacy affects all aspects of your life. It affects your ability to find work and keep work, and it affects your health because you can't always communicate well with your medical professionals. It affects your children's lives because you can't always communicate well with your children's teachers and the whole school system. There are many things that we do different here. As I mentioned before, just transportation, just lots of things that we do. One thing that came up that struck me was just our use, the frequency with which we have cesarean births as opposed to natural birth. I mean, that's a big deal. And just the way that we do things is very different. And so we try to teach in English that's conversational. Most people really need to learn our just myriad expressions, the way we say things, a lot of idiom and colloquial expressions, but also our accent, the way that we crunch words together and don't finish our consonants. It's just really hard to understand. And so that sort of practical application is what we try to do too. And that's where the individual one-to-one tutors are really nice, because in addition to teaching English, they also kind of can show them around the town and help them figure out how to live here.
I have spent some time teaching English as a second language. I know what you're talking about. And I spent some time in another country for 2 years, and it's very strange how in another country people talk so fast and run all their words together. But Americans don't do that. They just trail off. Dave, how many actual ICE interactions have there been in the greater Chippewa Valley?
One that we know of in 2017.
Elizabeth, how difficult is it for immigrants or refugees to find housing? Is that something that you know?
I know a little bit about it just because we work very closely with World Relief and other refugee resettlement organizations, and they've approached us and asked if we knew any low-cost housing. Of any low-cost housing. So I know it is kind of difficult, although I think that things have gotten better and they do have some inroads made into the housing. But as you all know, the whole community of Eau Claire, we do have a dearth of low-cost housing for everybody, not just refugees.
Do counties provide any help?
No. An organization like World Relief has a certain amount of money to work with, and then with that they can provide housing for a certain period of time, and then once that runs out, they really want everyone to be self-sufficient. It's not as long as you think it would be. It really isn't. It's about 3 months, sometimes 6 months, it just depends. The county helps in that if people qualify for public assistance after that runs out, then they can apply for that. But the whole idea is to get people self-sufficient in a very short period of time, probably about 3 months. So that means getting housing, getting transportation, getting the kids in school, getting some English, and getting a job and starting to put money in the bank.
Can I address one more thing in addition to that? And I think what Elizabeth is really talking about is important to distinguish, is that these are individuals who have refugee status. And so programs are created and benefits are available. But when we're talking about other new arrivals, individuals who have come to the U.S. either undetected or have been in the United States for a really long time, one myth I really like to make sure that people understand, and you can go out and repeat to other people, is that public benefits are not accessible for individuals who are undocumented. Okay, they are not accessible for individuals who are undocumented. If they have children who were born in the United States, those children, because they're US citizens, have access to food assistance, have access to Badger Care or Forward Care, to state assistance. But the parents themselves, when they fill out the applications, they do not qualify. And even if you are present with permission in the United States, even as a green card holder or a resident, you don't qualify for public benefits for 5 years. So again, these are not programs that are being filled with fraud and abused because individuals don't qualify for them. The refugee program does get very specific benefits, and it is unfortunately really short-lived, and people can't always get on their feet in the time in which they have access to it. But just to have that understanding.
That's a very good point to make. I did know that, but it's good to be reminded of that. So this card has questions for three of the four of you. But they're short. Amanda Jennerman, is it better to hide than to try to become legal?
This is being recorded. So I took an oath when I became a bar sworn-in representative of law, is that my candor to the court has to be honest. And so I can't sit here and tell you people should live in the shadows. What I can tell you is that it is really important, and I work with individuals to talk about what opportunities are available to them. And one of the things that this really impacts right now is, if you've heard about it, is that, and I hate the term, again, it's theirs, not mine, alien registration requirement. So the ARR is a provision that has always been in law, and it developed from 1940, I believe, and I think it's called the Smith Act. And what that means is that individuals who are present in the United States, there are certain aspects or certain documents that they may have in their possession that deem that they are registered and that our US government knows about them. So when somebody arrives off of an airplane with their visa, whether it's a student visa or some other, tourist visa, they're issued an I-94. And an I-94 is what Customs and Border Patrol puts into the system to say, we know that you're here, we give you a certain duration to stay in the United States. If you stay longer, there are consequences when you leave and you try to come back. If you stay for the designated time and you return to your home country, then you should be eligible to return again on that same visa another time. But that, like I-94, is considered a registration. Somebody who has a green card has registration. Somebody who has a work permit, even if it has expired 4 years ago and they weren't able to renew that work permit for whatever reasons, they are considered registered. But the ARR put out provisions that said, if you do not have one of these registered documents, you are required to register. They created a form online. If you don't register, you are subject to criminal penalties and civil penalties. If you don't carry your form of registration with you, you are subject to criminal penalties and civil penalties. And if you do not change your address timely, which is supposedly 10 days with the Immigration Service Center upon moving, if you are not a US citizen, you can be deported. These are provisions that have always been in the INA and present, but this administration is definitely using it as a tool of enforcement, because you have people in that gray area. I have clients that I'm working with that maybe don't have those registration documents, but once we apply for a benefit, they may get that registration document. And so I have to walk a fine line with my clients when I'm saying, I'm advising you that this is what the law is. What you choose to do is up to you. And so the aspect of living in the shadows versus trying to fix things, it's just not that easy to fix things. Believe me, I brainstorm left and right with individuals and families, and the hardest thing to say to a family is, there's nothing I can do for you. If you get caught, you might have, it's very backdoor. If you have been in the United States for a long duration of time, and you are picked up or immigration gets word of you, you may have a form of relief before an immigration judge that if you remained in the shadows, you might not qualify for. But right, I don't ever encourage somebody to hand themselves over to immigration because you are sort of setting yourself down a path of deportation. So I'm not sure if that's a fair way to answer that question, but that's the best I can do.
It's complicated. The second question is for John. How can you explain why some dairy farmers think their workers are the exception and most other farm worker immigrants are criminal?
A reporter asked me one time, what do you say to people that say that farmers are just doing this to hire somebody cheaply and to game the system, and that we're really the problem? And my response is, I'm a dairy farmer. We're trying to get these cows milked up to 3 times a day. We have to do it every day. It doesn't matter if it's Christmas. It doesn't matter if it's snowing outside. It doesn't matter if it's 20 degrees below zero. It doesn't matter if it's 100 degrees outside. We have to get that done. And we've done that on our farm for the last 125 years, every single day. And we're able to do that now with people that are willing to do it. And if you could show me somebody that would do it that isn't an immigrant, I would be really, really surprised. So what we should be saying is, why is there so much ineptitude in our country? Why, after 25 years in Wisconsin, probably 50 years in California, this situation, we've told congressmen over and over and over, we have to have something done, and nothing gets done. So don't blame me, blame your congressman, blame other voters that vote for people that don't want to get this done. We absolutely have to have these people working for us, or we don't exist. And we're not doing it because we want to, we do it because we have to. But now that we're doing it, we really love them. So.
Liz Hart, do you have a policy in case you're approached to share the information you collect?
Well, yes, we do. We can produce our intake form for anyone, I mean, legally, who has a right to see it. And of course, people who are refugees do have documentation that will show that they are allowed here. Our intake form does not ask for a social security number. It doesn't ask for immigration status or any sort of documentation. So, I mean, they'll basically get an email address, a phone number, and a home address if they put it down there and it is correct, and maybe an emergency contact number. But it's always been our policy to just not ask for social security numbers or immigration status. We just don't do that. It's never been a problem. We have discussed what we should do if ICE approaches us. We're not gonna lock the doors and hide in the interior rooms. We're just not gonna do that. So, but we know about the red cards, and we've given those to our students, and that's pretty much our plan.
Down to the last card here. And you all have been such an attentive audience. It's hard to sit in a chair for this long. This is the last question, and I believe it's from someone who attends at Emmanuel here. We have visitors coming from Malawi this summer. They are 7 to 8 members of our sister synod in Malawi. They are all working on their visas. All of them have their passports. While they are here, or in preparation for their visit, What advice can you give us to keep them safe during the visit, 2 weeks in August?
Can I just speak to that?
Your card?
I was assigned to ask this question, and as I listened to the panel, I realized it might not be an appropriate question, but also it's kind of, it's born out of this sense of fear that we have, which is maybe not justified, at least not in Eau Claire. I don't know. So that, and other people might have visitors coming that are of a different color, that, you know, from another country, and what do we do to keep them safe? And is that a necessary concern?
Do any one of the four of you want to speak to that?
I have a legal response to it. Respond to that. Do you have the individuals obtained their visas?
They're working on it.
They're working on them, okay. So one of the things that was promised is that there's likely gonna be a travel ban. And I think the student issue got the upfront attention recently. And so I think the travel ban got pushed back. I don't know if Malawi is one of the 43 countries that was listed in the New York Times. And again, source. I think it's a good source, but we don't know about it yet. And so depending on where the applicants are in their visa process overseas, one, is the post still gonna be open? And are they gonna be able to access their visas? So that's one thing. And we can talk about that later if you'd like. And then two is the amount of scrutiny that is now being leveled at these consulate posts is increasing. And so social media, a lot of different issues. There's this concept that if your ideology is not in line with what we think is American, we could deny you. And so I think we're gonna see a lot more consulate posts, one, shutting down, and two, discretionary denials, and unfortunately, people are not gonna be able to access visas to travel. So that's one thing, but then the second piece is, even if they have a visa and they show up in Houston, or they show up in Boston, like I'd be curious where their port of entry is, because we also know that different CBP offices, so your Customs and Border officer who welcomes you into the United States may not welcome them. And people can be set into secondary inspection. And so even though they have a visa, we also see people who think they're getting into the United States to visit these amazing programs and share, are being turned away and rejected, and visas are being canceled. And some are being detained.
So they could actually, in the process of coming in, be in, okay, and there's nothing we can do in preparation.
No, other than, just kind of know what people's rights are and say, this is what I want to exercise at this point. But again, I'll be curious to see how, if it's in August, where it's at with the travel ban. And I hope it doesn't impact your community visitors.
It changes. It changes all the time. I just want to add too, I have people traveling overseas on a green card that have lived in the United States for 40 years that have talked to me about, is it safe? Technically, it's safe. But there are stories of Border Patrol questioning people who have dual citizenship. Which are you the most loyal to?
Thank you all for coming here, and I want you to thank these people for coming to the panel. Here it comes.
I wanted to ask of the group up here, are you willing and able to accept donations, personal donations from people like us who are interested in helping you out?
We have ways to use money. One of those is we would really like to start a bond fund, and that would get people who are appearing in court opportunity to post a bond and get sent home to their family. And the bond fund is going to be hosted right here at Emmanuel, and through a group called Amparo. Amparo is a Lutheran group that assists migrant minors and other migrants. So a check made out to Emmanuel Amparo Fund would go to those kinds of things.
Can you spell it?
AAMMPARO.
Dave, it's also on the Emmanuel website.
Yeah.
When you want to give gifts.
If you go to the Emmanuel website, click on donation, scroll past all kinds of opportunities to donate, you'll come to the Amparo Fund. Amparo, assisting migrant minors with protection, advocacy, resources and
Opportunity.
opportunities. It's also worded in Spanish with only one M, which means refuge or fortress, or a place of protection.
And I can also get you some bond questionnaires. And so families, again, when they're working on gathering information and the power of attorney documents that you were talking about, because again, that's a really hard thing to sit down with a family and say, where would you want your children to go if you didn't come home from work that day? There's a lot of those materials, and we do have a specific bond questionnaire that we use in my office and that I use with the Community Immigration Law Center. So I'm happy to share resources. I think the more you can keep your money here, awesome. I think that's great. If you are looking at wanting to do more statewide or national, please let me know. I'd be happy to share with you where I think resources are needed.
I'm involved with an organization called PuentesBridges.org, and you can send money to that if you wanted to, but what we'd rather you do, not send us money, is to go and find an immigrant and get to know them by their first name, and you'll be doing a whole lot more good for us than giving us money.
Literacy Chippewa Valley has a website with a donate button, and so yes, we're always happy for donations and know that that's how we get about 60% of our funding. And also, I kind of agree with that too. I mean, all these people have such interesting stories and are really great folks and nice people, and you know, once they get going in our community and just get jobs and start working, you don't really see them much anymore because they're not so different. You know, they just kind of blend in.
With this self-interested question that was put out there, I should mention that if you are a member of League of Women Voters Greater Chippewa Valley, we do have our annual meeting next week on the 22nd at Old Town in Menominee. It is a wonderful venue, and if you haven't registered for that, quick, get on our website tonight and do it. We would like to have a few more people there than have already registered, although it looks looking like a reasonable turnout. How many members do we have now? Anyway, I won't go there. But I would like to see you next week on the 22nd for that, and of course the league accepts money too. And these people probably have things with them, like a business card or whatever, to give you, so you get things precisely. So I think I'm entitled to...
If anybody needs a red card.
I'm entitled to hand this over to Lori.
Thank you, Ellen. So we do have a few more minutes until 7:30, and we can take questions from the floor. And then the speakers will stick around a little bit as we're cleaning up, and they'll have another opportunity to ask. So.
I just have a question about schools. Do we know if anyone has been accessed through a school in Wisconsin? And then there's just seems to be, I'm from the Rice Lake area, and there's quite a bit of animosity within the Barron and the Rice Lake communities because there's so much resources, so many resources within the Rice Lake and Barron districts going towards ELL programming and those needs. And so, you know, just with the shortages and the cutting, it just builds that, you know, animosity.
I guess what I can say as far as schools as secure locations. I mean, there's a lawsuit that has just recently gone up on this regarding churches and saying that these are safety areas and that people are not supposed to be approached in that. And again, there's litigation going on around that right now. I don't think we've seen a huge experience of that in Wisconsin. There was a teacher out of Milwaukee that a few weeks ago that was called to go in for a check-in, and they weren't sure whether or not she was going to be released or not. And VOSIS out of Milwaukee had 1,500 people there, right? But that's Milwaukee, and that's a big community, and you have rapid response. And we are talking about more rural communities and harder to transport a larger visual experience. So work with your local Dave, and he'll get you connected on that response. But I also hear what you're saying as far as resources and I think it's more the image that people have, and they presume that all these resources are being utilized for people who don't have right to them. So I think there's sadly the need just to increase education around that. But I understand the tension around those issues when everybody's feeling the cut. I mean, I think Governor Evers is like, what do you want me to do? He's doing the best he can under the circumstance.
Eau Claire School District could be a model. You could find out what they were doing. I can help you find out what they're doing, because they have been very, very proactive. Because of school shootings, you can't just walk into a school. You need to be checked out, and that's to our advantage, because the administrators and the people, the receptionists have been trained. If ICE comes, they're not to be admitted. This is what a judicial warrant looks like, and you have to let them in. This is what an administrative warrant looks like. You don't need to let them in. They've been really trained on that policy. And also not to give out names, that they're not required to give out names of people that are there.
That's where I think it'll come down to the administration and
Yeah.
the local representatives.
But I'm sure they've got some documents that could be shared, or
This might be a question for Amanda or Elizabeth, but I'm going to use the word pall. There is an ominous pall within the country. Have you noticed any issues, an uptick in racism?
Not within the context of our organization. So I'll just leave it at that. I mean, I just, in my pathway as a white English-speaking woman from this community, I really don't have many scenes where I experience racism or I see somebody else experiencing racism. However, I can't say that means that they don't exist either. So,
Or homophobia?
yeah. So, but I don't think that they don't exist.
I think that because I, in a general sense, work with communities every day, that I think there's always a presence of that experience, and I think people are feeling generally more concerned about walking around on the street, and they feel less safe. And whether that is designated based on their race or their perceived immigration status, I think there is an uptick in the way in which that is being translated. But on the flip side, I can say the fact that this room is filled with people, right? And what communities are doing and making their voices heard and saying, we are not going to tolerate this and we stand with you. I think that has been a really positive counter to some of, again, the really harmful rhetoric. So where things are getting dark, we are also seeing people stand up and say this is not acceptable. and that we will stand with our brothers and our sisters, no matter what their race is, no matter what their religion is, how they choose to identify sexually, orientation, gender-wise. So I try to turn that and say where it's dark, there are some really positive things happening. But I likewise agree with you that as a white woman, I don't want to speak for a community that I don't represent.
One more question, I see the hand up over here.
I just wanted to address the last questioner. A good source of information for that kind of happening, the statistics, is the Southern Poverty Law Center. They have a lot of information on hate groups and trends and things like that, so you may want to check that out.
That does exist in the Chippewa Valley. It always has, it always will. Yep.
All right, it is 7:30, and you have shown remarkable stamina in sitting in your seats. So I knew this panel would be good, and at this point in the evening, I'm thinking we have a rock star panel. So please give them a huge hand again. And I also thank the sponsors. I thank the church. I thank you as the audience. You have just shown so much interest and respect. One thing I'll add from the league is we're coming up with programming for the next year. And if you would like to see more immigration-related programs, please let us know. I guess anybody who's walking around with one of these things around their neck is a league member. So as you're filing out, just pigeonhole one of us and give us some ideas for what you'd like to see in immigration programming. And with that, I will bid you a good night and safe travels.